And good evening and welcome in. This is the Wager Alarm live stream here on fantasyalarm.com and wageralarm.com. I am Craig Mish, as always, here with your little Tuesday night teaser recap of what happened over the weekend. And Rob Trayah back in the house for another edition of the show. And Rob, thanks for sitting in for Howard Bender, who's got some little time off this week. What's going on, Rob? How are you?
Nothing much. Getting ready for championship week here in college football. Football season starting to wind down, which is kind of sad, but snow's coming too, so it's all here.
I hear you. In the southeast, we have like 50-degree weather, so it's everyone's kind of freaking out. Iguanas are falling from the trees. That's what happens here in South Florida. Matt Sells is producing tonight, so thanks for Matt once again for stepping in and helping out. And before we kind of dive into our results from last week, a little bit of a mixed bag of it. Rob, it's this time of the year that you got these championships games coming up, and of course those are super important. We've seen some coaching changes happen. Washington's Chris Peterson is out.
Yeah.
I think that you're going to probably see some more. I think Lane Kiffin at FAU, maybe this is his last game coaching as well.
True.
And then Howard and I will have our bowl season preview, which is coming up in 2 weeks from now. And Rob, I think that more than anything else, and we saw this last year a little bit, we had, I believe, about 8 to 10 players who were significant who are now playing in the NFL who sat out and didn't play in the bowl season. And there's some speculation that we could be looking between 20 and 30 players who are not going to be suiting up for those bowls, which on our streams and for our purposes is super important. And for people who are watching us, Rob, it creates a lot of difficulty knowing, especially for teams like Alabama that have a half a dozen kids who aren't really interested in playing.
Yeah, exactly. And the first lines that'll come out from Vegas are just a guess at that point by anybody's imagination, from whether you're betting on a team or even Vegas setting the line, just hoping and praying that guys play. And it's kind of scary. I think the whole Jalen Smith injury from a few years back from Notre Dame really caused a lot of eyebrows, and there might be just a huge mass exodus of these kids that will never see their senior year, essentially. And if the talent's there, they're going to hop to the NFL at this point, especially with no money involved still in college.
Yeah, and I think that that injury was the first, but the other one, and it had nothing to do with the bowl game, but is Tua Tagovailoa getting hurt. Exactly. Really shocked a lot of kids out there looking at what their future could be, and it's really hard to begrudge them for it, especially if you're playing in a bowl game that's before New Year's Day. I think that some people would make the case that even on New Year's Day, it is important to some of these schools, and there will be a couple of teams that are playing in the Cotton Bowl. And it looks like Virginia could be headed to the Orange Bowl as well. So There are, certainly some things to accomplish. My Gators probably playing in the Orange Bowl or Cotton Bowl as well. And I get it, but you can also understand the personal side of it. Can't afford to have any injuries at all this time of the year. So a couple of weeks we'll dive into those games. But first and foremost, Rob, let's go back and check in on our picks from the Super Contest last week. Sure. And Rob, our overall record was, again, over 500. We went 4 wins and 3 losses. So, talking about some of the wins and losses, what did you see from that? I know that, Kansas State was obviously a very good pick. That was one of our winners for sure. Mm-hmm. Marshall looked good there for a while. Unfortunately, they ended up going to overtime. Beyond that, what do you think about some of the college picks, the way they worked out?
Yeah, Texas Tech, no defense showed up really in the whole first half. Both teams were going up and down the field, and Texas found a way to find some D in the second half. Oregon State was a pleasant surprise on the whole year. They didn't get.
Yeah,
to
they
a
really
bowl.
were. Yeah,
they didn't get to a bowl, but they definitely outperformed expectations. Got to 5 wins, which is about 2.5, 3 more than their total. Gave a good fight to Oregon, especially after they had to bounce back after a tough loss. But yeah, I mean, towards the end of the year, some of the teams are just playing for pride, and you could see a team like an Oregon State that was getting almost close to 3 touchdowns, put up a good fight, and they were in the game too for a while, but at the end of the day, cover's cover. So.
Yeah, no, that's true, and we'll certainly take it. Our NFL picks in the Golden Nugget, if I'm not mistaken, Rob, one was the Colts, and the other was the Steelers, so we split those picks, and then, of course, we used them in the Super Contest, and our Super Contest picks, unfortunately, for you guys who track our picks, I know this week was not a good week for us. And as I said last week on our live stream, Rob, I think you missed it, is that there are very few players that are not a quarterback in the NFL that I think mean as much to their team. And T.Y. Hilton is one of those guys. And that just really bummed me out when they announced that he was going to be out of that game. That takes nothing away from Zach Pascal. I know he had a good game for the Colts last week, too. But when Hilton is on the field, I just feel like the Colts have a shot. And when he's not, there's just not a game-changing guy. And I do have a little bit of regret on that one, taking them in both places at -2, -3.5. It looked too easy to me to take Tennessee because they were the better team and playing better. Game was close at the half, Rob, but then Tennessee pulled away late.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you guys get like the bad end of the line. I know by the time it closed, it was close to a pick'em game, but I think you're dead right. The whole Ty injury definitely certainly didn't help. Eric Ebron going down earlier in the last couple of weeks, as well as Marlon Mack. Like, that team's just so physically depleted. They play well at home. Jacoby played all right, but if you could point to another team that's had as many kicking woes, I would love to see it. Adam Vinatieri, unfortunately.
You got to remind me, Rob, for the rest of the season not to take the Colts. I mean, in a short line, you can't do it. And look, I'll give Frank Reich credit for being very loyal to him. But, man, I mean, he has cost a couple covers in a couple games. And this will be it for him. Of course, he'll be in the Hall of Fame. So we used those 2 picks in the Super Contest. We also used the Chicago Bears in the Super Contest. And unfortunately, that line was 4.5 on Thanksgiving. So we got the bad end of the stick on that one as well. So we were 1-2 there. I know we took, was it Arizona, the Cardinals? Against the Rams. The Rams decided to show up, and then we lost on Monday Night Football as well, which was a really close game. So, unfortunately, a 1-4 Super Contest, and that's the first time that's happened all year long. Unfortunately for us, we dip right back down to around the 500 mark, so we'll try and pick it up and do a little bit better this week. But this week, Rob, let's take an early look at some of the college football games, if you wouldn't mind. Sure. And, of course, all eyes will be on the SEC Championship, LSU taking on Georgia. It's a foregone conclusion. The winner of this game, I believe, is in the playoff, and the loser, could be out. I don't know what they'll do with LSU if LSU loses to Georgia, but I think if Georgia beats LSU, they're going to have to put them in. It could end up being 2 SEC teams. That's going to drive people nuts. Mm-hmm. How do you see this game playing out? Does Georgia stand a chance in this one?
If you had asked me a week ago if they stood a chance, I'd say yes. With injury information coming in about DeAndre Swift possibly not playing, he's questionable at the moment. Their top wideout being suspended for the first half after getting in a brawl at Georgia Tech in their rivalry game. I think LSU just has too much on offense. I understand Georgia's defense is really, really good. Don't get me wrong about that, but their offense hasn't shown anything this year with Jake Fromm, to be honest. If their running game's not going, LSU can kind of key on it, and you can expect Joe Burrow, who's probably going to win the Heisman at this point.
I'm sure. Yeah,
to put up the numbers that they're going to need to win that game. So.
Now, as far as the back end of the playoff, on Friday night, Oregon will play Utah. Yep. Hard to really gauge what Oregon's mentality is going to be in this one because, of course, they have no chance to play for the college football championship. Do you think that they get up for this one against Utah? And if Utah wins, the spread's 6.5. Utah's -6.5. Sure. If Utah wins the game, Rob, does that put them in automatically, or are they going to have to wait and see what happens between Baylor and Oklahoma? Because I hear both sides. I hear some people say Baylor needs to win and win convincingly. I'm sorry, Oklahoma needs to win and win convincingly over Baylor, and Oklahoma, by the way, an 8.5-point favorite.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be a tough call. There are some people who don't want to see Utah play in the championship because they think that their brand of football is very similar to the way Notre Dame played last year, and we know what happened when Notre Dame played against Clemson. So how do you see this shaking out?
I think it'll be definitely interesting. I mean, Oregon will definitely be interested in this, whether it be a Rose Bowl bid or, just getting on a national stage on a Friday night. It's the only championship game that's going to happen before Saturday, so you're going to have a lot of scouts. You're going to have a lot of eyes on that game for sure. I think the playoff committee did something very interesting tonight in terms of their rankings, where Baylor is up to 7 now, kind of out of the blue after beating Kansas. So they're kind of setting it up that if Oklahoma wins, I think they're going to push them forward because they'll say that's more of a quality win compared to Utah over
and beating them twice.
Oregon. Yeah, beating them twice. Whereas Oregon's a little bit further down the standings. They're 12 or 13, sure, but at this time of the year, like you were saying, Utah's brand of ball might not be pretty comparatively to Oklahoma, where you're going to get Jalen Hurts and Lincoln Riley possibly on a national stage and a lot of points, which is going to put fans in the seats. So it'll be really, really interesting. I do think if Utah wins, they're going to have to wait it out, and they're going to have to find out probably from a TV on Sunday whether or not they're getting in or not.
It's a tough call. I think they're going to have a tough call. Clemson, Dabo Swinney said that they can't take Virginia lightly, of course, because who knows if they lose close. He's making fun of the committee, saying they'll bump Clemson out. And he feels they should be the number one team in the country. And truth be told, they won every game last year. They're winning every game this year. He's got a pretty good point. Ohio State just has looked phenomenal. Clemson is minus 29 against Virginia. Virginia's an okay team, but this quarterback that they have, Perkins, one game to the next, I have no idea what he's going to do. So I would think that Clemson would win. Whether they cover by the 29 is another story. And then we cap off Championship Saturday with Wisconsin and Ohio State. And eerily, Wisconsin or Ohio State only a 16.5-point favorite. Remember, people were upset with their line against Penn State. Penn State ended up keeping it close and covering. Michigan, 9.5 early on. Looked like there was a chance they could keep the game close, and then Ohio State ran away with this one. I mean, crazy things would have to happen, I think, Rob, for Wisconsin to get in that Final Four.
Yeah.
My guess is LSU would have to probably win. Clemson would have to lose. I mean, obviously, Clemson would have to be out. They'd have to lose to Virginia. Oklahoma would have to lose probably to Baylor. And then Wisconsin would have to probably blow out Ohio State. But it does create an interesting matchup here. And look, the Buckeyes have looked as good as any team in the country after what they did last week to Michigan. Yeah. Find it hard-pressed to think that Wisconsin can win the game. And I would be very worried for them if they went down 7-0 or 10-0, something like that. But the line right now is 16.
Yeah, definitely a bigger spread. A little bit more controlled environment here. Obviously, the first time these guys played, it was a good game, pretty much up until the first drive of the third quarter when the rain started to kind of settle in at Ohio State. And, Wisconsin had to start throwing the ball around, and that's just not what they do. Jack Cohn's good. He's just not that good, especially when you're facing Chase Young on the other side. Justin Fields, his knee is very interesting. If he gets hit again and he goes down for the third time in 3 games, how's he going to react to that? When it comes to the playoff committee, I'm all for chaos. LSU lose, Ohio State loses. Let's just throw it all in the air and see what happens. See if they throw in this.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, the Big Ten game is always known for something weird. A couple of years ago when Dwayne Haskins got his first start and everybody was talking about how Ohio State wasn't going to get anywhere, and they go on and win a national championship from it. So a lot of things still in the air. We'll find out probably by Sunday afternoon what's really going on.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the lines in these games are pretty significant. Memphis is a huge favorite over Cincinnati. This is a rematch of last week, 9.5. Boise State's 14-point favorites over Hawaii. Hawaii's had this magical season somehow. They ended up crushing Army last week, so they get in there as well. But not one college football spread going into the weekend is less than a touchdown. So they're predicting a lot of subpar games, but as we know, when we've seen this before, that doesn't always happen. So that's our look at the college football. Let's take a brief look before we get out of here on the NFL on Thursday night. Rob, I mean, really, the Cowboys kind of sitting pretty here at this point, to be honest with you. I know that they're getting ripped and destroyed as to what happened with them last Thursday. I tell people all the time, when you're wagering and you're betting, you got to throw away the week before. And look, the Bears, clearly, I'm not a believer in them as well. They've made Dallas a 3-point favorite on Thursday night after what happened to the Eagles losing to the Dolphins. I think Dallas, all they really have to do is finish 8-8, and that probably gets them the East and even a home game in the playoffs. And I really can't trust the Bears either, but the home team has fared pretty well, Rob, on Thursday Night Football.
Yeah, the short turnaround usually will get at you, but both of these teams obviously getting a week since they're playing off Thanksgiving. Cowboys are just such an enigma at this point. They're such a talented team. The coaching staff, unfortunately, just lets them down every year. Jason Garrett, I mean, essentially at this point, Jerry Jones has kind of whispered the fact that it's Super Bowl or bust for Jason Garrett. So
should be.
Yeah, at this point, with Dak on his rookie deal still, which is coming up, they haven't used Zeke enough this year. Their defense didn't really show up against Josh Allen, which was really surprising. But you going against this Bears offense that who knows what's going to happen. Mitch Trubisky actually showed life, but you're facing Matt Patricia and the Lions D, so playing prevent all game, essentially. Yeah, I think it's actually one of the better Thursday night games which we've had lately, especially with all the playoff implications.
Sure.
It's wild to think that right now, if the season ended, the Cowboys would be hosting the 49ers at home.
It could happen. They'll have to figure out and somehow change that rule too. Yeah. The big news in the NFL today was Ron Rivera was let go by the Carolina Panthers after a long, successful career there, and it just kind of felt like the end was coming, and it comes sometimes where you have a good run with a team and it's just time to make a change. Usually teams in the NFL rally around that. And in sports in general, they rally around that. They've made Atlanta a 2.5-point favorite over Carolina this week. And that's kind of the only problem that I have, Rob, is that how do you make the Falcons a favorite over anyone, honestly, in the NFL? And that's not to say that Carolina is a good football team. And they've really fallen back defensively over the last few weeks, which is surprising as well. But, looking at this, I think that you probably, if you're taking Carolina, need to get the 2.5 now. My guess is that this line goes down. I could see this being a pick 'em at kickoff.
Yeah, Falcons a couple of weeks ago obviously walked into Carolina and kind of probably set Ron Rivera on his death march, blowing out Kyle Allen in his 5 picks. So it'll be, I think, more people like you and I were talking about earlier are going to be more interested in what happens to Christian McCaffrey the rest of the year. If his usage stays the same, it's probably going to help a lot of fantasy owners.
Sure.
Especially, what happens with Kyle Allen at this point. Kyle Allen and Cam Newton. Is Kyle Allen playing for his job next year, or is Cam back? There's a lot of questions around it. It'll be really interesting. But as you're saying, Falcons didn't really show much last Thursday against the Saints.
They had a nice 2-week run. They've made them a favorite. I would have to side with Carolina, at least the early look on that for sure with me.
Exactly.
A couple of other games just to take a brief look at here. The marquee games this week, Ravens and Bills. Baltimore is a 5.5-point favorite at Buffalo. Of course, the Bills have had 10 days to prepare for Lamar Jackson. That doesn't seem to matter for any team in the NFL. But I will say this, the second half of the 49ers-Ravens game was the most contained that Lamar Jackson has been in any NFL game this season. So I don't know if that will give other teams a blueprint. And honestly, if these two teams face each other in the Super Bowl, I thought the 49ers did a really good job containing him. I know Cleveland did a good job a few weeks ago, many weeks ago, I should say, like 6 or 7 weeks ago. I don't even know how the Browns ended up winning that game, but they did. Can the Bills keep this close? Home dogs are okay. Road dogs are really the thing that's blowing up the NFL this year. It's been great. They've been, I think, almost 65%. Home dogs have been okay. But the Ravens are minus 5.5. It's just so hard to go against Lamar Jackson in any game. But at the same time, I always love a good underdog. By the way, these two teams played September of last year, and the Ravens won 47-3.
Yeah, the Lamar show just keeps trudging on at this point. Their schedule, I think, is probably going to catch up to them in this spot. From playing the Pats, the Niners, as well as going to the West Coast and playing the Rams, and then traveling back east again, Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't do a great job of stopping the run, but I think their defense is good enough in this spot. If you look at it, if you take a look at the second time teams play Lamar, he's 1-3, and he actually gets limited quite a bit. The Browns being one of those teams that have beaten him before. The Chargers last year when they faced him in the playoffs. When the tape gets out and a team sees the speed and the scheme of the Ravens, it's kind of more of an interesting dynamic for me. So,
yeah, the other marquee game, 49ers and Saints. The Saints are 3-point favorites in this one, so basically they're saying not a real advantage for either team. Total is interesting at 44. Seems like a lot of points for two teams that especially on the 49ers side, they don't score that often. And both have kind of had some red zone issues as well this year. We saw that a few weeks ago when the Saints played the Falcons. And it kind of takes them some time, I think, to get things going. What do you make of this one? Basically saying even matched game. They're giving the 49ers 3 points in this one.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Superdome is the ultimate home field advantage, I guess, in the NFL. Drew Brees just doesn't seem like he has the same arm strength. I know the numbers are there, but when you're talking about red zone efficiency and getting in the balls into type windows, it's not really there comparatively to the years past. So Niners, again, another tough travel spot, going from Baltimore, maybe home, then back down to New Orleans. I would take the home team here. I think the Niners have played well. They need their offense. They need to get healthy with Kittle and Sanders and Samuel. Matt Breida might be back, but I would still lean Saints on the side.
All right, and then the final game that we'll look at here, Chiefs and Patriots. I think that this is a direct reaction to how New England has looked the last couple of weeks, Rob. Kansas City's defense has been a disaster for the majority of the season. Andy Reid off the bye won again, improved to 18-3 last week. And this is probably the last time I would guess that you'll be able to get the Patriots as a -3 the rest of the year. I know that they were -3 last week. They lost against Houston. I think if this game happened 3 weeks ago, Rob, based on the way New England was playing, this line's 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
But it has come way down. And the Patriots always have that 2 or 3 game stretch over the course of the season where you think it's headed one way, and then it goes back to the way it was. The question is that the case again this season, and will that be the case at home on Sunday? They are 3-point favorites in the marquee game in the afternoon.
Yeah, another market kind of reaction at this point. I mean, the Pats are 10-2. Let's not forget that.
Right.
They haven't looked terrific. I get it. The Cowboys game was in the rain. The offense just isn't there. You could tell Brady's missing Gronk. Edelman's not fully healthy. I mean, most of the team wasn't healthy last week. It's 17 people questionable with the flu.
Yeah.
But if you look at the other side, the Chiefs are the healthiest they've been all year. You know, they got Tyreek. They have Kelsey back. Mahomes looked good last week. He ran for a touchdown on a scramble.
Sure.
This is definitely going to be the toughest home matchup I think the Pats are going to face, especially defensively. And it'll be really interesting to see how they bounce back, especially after what Deshaun Watson and the Texans kind of did to him last week at home.
Yeah, and I agree. I think New England probably rights the ship. I'm not a huge fan of the Chiefs. I've seen them play defense too often this season, and again, hard to go against a trend like that with Andy Reid off the bye. 18-3, and now sets 21, so he'd be 17-4 against the spread. I mean, that is just an incredible number. I'm not going to ignore that. Rob, before we end, any other games this weekend looking at in the NFL, or any interesting news and notes to pass along here before we go?
I think it's pretty interesting right now in college, the amount of gigs that are actually available. I know we talked about Rivera going out, Chris Peterson, like you said earlier.
Sure.
There's 3 SEC jobs open. I know
Arkansas, Missouri, yeah.
Arkansas, Missouri, Ole Miss, the whole
Ole Miss too
scenario, which would be really interesting.
After last week, come on. I mean, the guy.
You can't beat
that ends up happening, and you lose the game with the guy trying to urinate on the field, faking that. I mean, I mean, of all the things that I've seen, I mean, getting the +3 and winning that was one of the wackiest. I mean, people don't even talk about the ending to that game where they converted a 4th and 24, and then a 4th and 4, and then another 4th down on an offsides. Yeah, man, Matt Luke just. I mean, look, you're in the SEC. Eventually, you would figure through recruiting that once every 3 or 4 years in that conference, you would get enough kids to compete. And I think that is the shelf life for a coach in the SEC. After 3 or 4 years, if you don't play for a conference championship or come close, you're going to lose your gig. And
there's too much money involved down there.
There is
too much money, like you said.
And next year you'll see it again. I think Will Muschamp is going to have some pressure on him next year for sure. That's the next one in South Carolina. But you saw Barry Odom lose his job. Arkansas, I don't know. I mean, after they let go of Brett Bielema, I don't know. I mean, they were much better with him than they were with the other guy who got fired. So. Marquee jobs open for sure in the SEC, and you're right. They think about this: Jimbo Fisher left FSU in a great spot to go to Texas A&M and take that money with the Aggies, and the Aggies haven't really won anything either. So I think that's a really good point, and it'll be interesting to see in the bowl games because usually those coachless bowls don't do very well, and those teams that don't have the coach don't cover, don't win almost ever. Kind of feel like they're abandoned, and for good reason.
Exactly.
All right, well, that'll do it for the Wager Alarm live stream tonight. A little bit of a shortened edition. Howard and I will be back on Friday night. We'll give our picks for the Golden Nugget football contest and also the Las Vegas Super Contest at the Westgate Resort. I want to thank our producer, Matt Sells, for producing the live stream tonight. As always, you can catch all of our tickets, every pick that we make, over at wageralarm.com. Rob, thanks again for sitting in for Howard tonight. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up down the line.
Thanks, Rick.
All right, that'll do it for the Wager Alarm live stream tonight. For Rob, I'm Craig. Talk to you Friday night right here on wageralarm.com.